look at a map of the world as it exists today. You'll notice a large number of colors. Every nation here in today's world, pretty much all of them are independent nations. And each one has its flag. And of course that was the desired effect at the beginning of history, that each nation would try to become independent. There is only one problem with that. An independent nation can do anything it wants to do. And this was shown by Germany in World War I and World War II, and by a number of other nations also that decided they wanted to attack their neighbors for whatever reason. So therefore, the idea of independent nations, while it was very desirable in the past, it's not as desirable in the future. Now we're going to look at a map of the united world. You see there is no color in any of the nations. And why is that? Because in the united world, every nation is a member nation. And they are going to follow the law of an ideal democracy, and there's going to be all of the united world's regulations are going to be followed. There's going to be no war is allowed, no violence, no military weapons are permitted anywhere. So we have a totally peaceful world with the united world. And this is what we're looking for. Obviously, these nations have given up what you would call their independence, but they are now they are dependent on the united world to preserve world peace. All right, now we're going to look at some of the processes of becoming member nations and forming the united world military. As we've already mentioned, the free democracies would be taking control of the world's destiny by joining together to form the United World Government and the United World Constitution. Every nation in the world would be required to become a member nation in the United World within 6 months. A nation becomes a member nation by agreeing to first abide by the United World Constitution, abide by the Code of World Laws, and very importantly, adopt the ideal democracy constitution as its own. Then every member nation will have identical ideal democracy constitutions instead of the varying ones they had before. So this is very desirable, and we can look at some of the constitutions in the world today, and a lot of them just regard having elections as being a democracy, and they can elect a dictator who can do whatever he wants, and things like that. Now, the founding nations, which would be over 100 free democracies, will quickly become member nations and demonstrate the benefits of the united world to the rest of the world, forming the United World Military to enforce the United World Constitution. Now this process is something that would automatically take place. When the founding nations become member nations, they will turn over all of their military forces and weapons of war, including nuclear, to the United World. This forms the United World Military, which would enforce the ban on war and violence, especially global terrorism, and the total world disarmament while maintaining global peace. So the United World Military is essential to making sure that the united world is able to survive. Now, the United World Military would also protect the citizens of non-member nations from their totalitarian leaders if necessary, since the United World has been placed in charge of the entire world. So if it was observed that the leaders were not cooperating, the United World Military could enter the country and force the leaders to retire. Number 6, as other nations become member nations, they would simply disband their military forces and turn over all weapons of war to the United World. And any violent groups, especially terrorists, would be required to disband, turn in their weapons, and return to a peaceful life in the rapidly forming global democracy. The United World Military would eliminate the increasing threat of nuclear terrorism. So this has become a concern in recent months, and the United World Military would eliminate that problem. Now we'll look at some of the things that it will take to complete the global democracy. What the citizens of non-member religious and political totalitarian nations will see taking place after the United World is formed. First, that over 100 founding nations have become member nations, and that their military forces have formed the United World Military. Second, the United World Military is ending war, violence, and global terrorism worldwide. Third, that in the growing global democracy, the citizens of member nations are governing themselves, not being restricted or controlled by a religion, ideology, or totalitarianism. Fourth, that the citizens of member nations are enjoying peace, freedom, equality, justice, security, and unlimited opportunity. 5, that the United World would assist the citizens of any nation in the process of becoming member nations, and the United World Military would protect them from their leaders if necessary. 6, some examples of non-democracies becoming democracies and thriving. First, Great Britain and many other nations in the years after 1776. Of course, America separated from Great Britain after the Revolutionary War. But a number of other nations saw that democracy was good, and they became democracies. Second, Germany and Japan after World War II were required to become democracies. And this is a good example for any totalitarian nation, because before the wars were over, Germany and Japan were both totalitarian nations. After they were required to become democracies, they became thriving nations, and the people adjusted to democracies very well. Turkey in the mid-1920s is an example for all Islamic nations. Now, this happened a long time ago, but Turkey was a member of an Islamic empire, and they decided they would drop out. They abolished the Islamic rule. They created a democracy by adopting a civil code of laws, which they got from a European nation, to replace the restrictive and controlling Islamic law. And Turkey, again, has done very well, and the Islamic nations could use them as an example. Religion isn't the solution for Islamic countries. It's the problem. Ideal democracy with separation of church and state is the solution, not only for Islamic countries, but for the entire world. A peaceful and cooperative global democracy is the ultimate solution for all of the world's problems. Ideal democracy must peacefully replace Islamic law and totalitarianism. The process of peacefully imposing ideal democracy upon the world can work, and it will work. Once the United World is formed and the founding nations have become member nations, and the United World Military is ending all war and violence in the world, the people of every country in the world will be demanding to be an ideal democracy, with government of the people, by the people, and for the people, and it will not perish from the earth.